Upper Volta, 1983, Thomas Sankara is brought to power through a military coup that gained popular support from among the poorest people in the country. Beyond the elegant military uniforms and the Marxist discourse, a young and dynamic Pan-African leader has just been born in the continent. He is ready to put his ideas to work in service of his people. However, Thomas Sankara was gunned down by a hit squad on October 15, 1987, a little more than 4 years after coming to power as an army captain at the age of just 33. His assassination was masterminded by Blaise Compaore, a man who helped to bring him to power in 1983. In this edition of Hispu Media, we bring to your view the story of Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, the upright man. This is a story of trust and betrayal. Please stay tuned. Welcome to Hispu Media, in-depth history. Remember to like this video, it will go a long way to help us. And if you are new to our channel, please subscribe. Thank you. Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara was born on December 21, 1949 in the northern city of Yako, Upper Volta. He was the third of 10 children of Joseph and Margaret Sankara. His father, Joseph Sankara, was of Miss Mosi Fulani ancestry, while his mother, Margaret Kinda, was of Stret Mosi ancestry. He grew up in Gar, a town in the humid southwest, where his father was sent as an auxiliary gendarme. The family shared a brick house on top of a hill overlooking the rest of Gao with the families of other gendarmes. Thomas Sankara attended primary education in the southwestern city of Bobo Dioulasso, the second largest city in Upper Volta after Ouagadougou. He took his studies seriously and excelled in mathematics and French. Despite enormous pressure to attend seminary school after his elementary education, Sankara chose to take entrance exams into the secular school system. He passed the exams in flying colors. This decision to continue his studies at the nearby Lycée Ozen Coulibaly proved to be a turning point in his career. Because the Lycée was in Bobo Dioulasso, the country's commercial center, he was able to leave his father's household. At Lycée, Sankara made close friends including Fidel Toho, whom he later named as a minister in his government, and Soumen Touré, who was in a more advanced class. Sources claimed that his parents, who were Roman Catholics, wanted him to become a priest, but his desire to join the military was stronger. At that time, the military had become popular in the country after ousting the despised government of Maurice and Yamego. Also, young intellectuals saw the military as a national institution that might have the ability to control the inefficient and corrupt bureaucracy, upset the excessive dominance of traditional leaders, and help to modernize the country in general. Further to this, admission into the military academy would come with a scholarship. Otherwise, Sankara would find it difficult to pay the fees for further studies. He took and passed the entrance exams into the academy. With the first intake of 1966, Sankara entered the military academy of Kadiogo in Ouagadougou at the age of just 17. While there, he witnessed the first military coup d'etat in Upper Volta led by Lieutenant Colonel Sango Lamizana on the 3rd of January 1966. While still in the academy, civilian professors were deployed to teach the training officers on social sciences. In a certain way, Thomas Sankara was shaped by Adama Touré, the academic director at that time. Touré taught history and geography and was known to have progressive ideas, even though he never publicly shared them. He invited a few of his brightest and more politically inclined students, among them Thomas Sankara, to join informal discussions about imperialism, neo-colonialism, socialism and communism, the Soviet and Chinese revolutions, the liberation movements in Africa, and similar topics outside of the classroom. This became the first time Thomas Sankara would be systematically exposed to a revolutionary idea on his country, Upper Volta, and the entire world. Aside from his academic and extracurricular political activities, Sankara also pursued his passion for music and played the guitar. After completing basic military training in secondary school, Sankara began his military career at the age of 19. In 1970, at the age of just 20, Sankara was sent to Madagascar for officer training at the military academy of Ansirabe. Here, he witnessed the popular uprising against the government of Philibert Tsiranana of Madagascar between 1971 and 1972. At that time, Sankara also began to read the works of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. This proved to have profoundly influenced his political views for the rest of his life. By 1974, he was deployed to fight in the border war between Upper Volta and Mali. The young, charismatic and dogged Sankara rose to prominence as a result of his performance in the war. However, as his political consciousness grew, he would later renounce the war, calling it useless and unjust. In 1976, he became the commander of the Commando Training Center in Po. In the same year, he met Blaise Compaore in Morocco. Compaore would become a friend and a betrayer. During the presidency of Colonel Saye Zabo, Sankara and a group of other young officers formed a secret organization called the Communist Officers Group, ROC. Other well-known members were Henry Zongo, Jean-Baptiste Bukare Lingani, and Blaise Compaore. In 1981, Sankara was appointed Minister of Information during the military government of Saye Zabo. He excelled in this position and differentiated himself from the rest of the government officials in many ways, including biking to work every day instead of driving in a car. Also, while his predecessors would gag the media and censor journalists and newspapers, Sankara encouraged investigative journalism and allowed media freedom. This led to publication of government scandals by both private and state-owned newspapers. On the 12th of April 1982, and in opposition to what he saw as an anti-labor drift by the regime, Sankara resigned his position as minister and declared misfortune to those who gagged the people. After a successful military coup of 7th November 1982 brought Major Dr. Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo to power, Sankara became Prime Minister in January 1983. Unfortunately, he was dismissed few months later on May 17, 1983. Within those 4 months, Sankara was believed to have pushed Ouedraogo's regime for more progressive reforms in Upper Volta. Sankara would then be arrested after the French president's African Affairs advisor, Guy Pen, visited Colonel Yurian Sombe later that year. Henry Zongo and Jean-Baptiste Bukare Lingani were also placed under arrest. The decision of the government to arrest Thomas Sankara proved to be a very unpopular one among the young officers in the military regime, and his imprisonment created enough momentum for his friend Blaise Compaore to lead another coup. A military coup d'etat organized by his compatriot Blaise Compaore brought Sankara to power on August 4, 1983. He was just 33 years old at the time. Sankara, who was inspired by the likes of Fidel Castro of Cuba and Che Guevara, as well as John Jerry Lawrence of Ghana, saw himself as a revolutionary figure. As president, he promoted the Democratic and Popular Revolution, RDP. In a speech delivered on 2nd of October 1983, Sankara described the ideology of the revolution as anti-imperialist, and his policies were geared towards fighting corruption and promoting reforestation. On the first anniversary of his ascension into power on 4th of August 1984, he renamed the country Burkina Faso, meaning the land of upright people. He also gave it a new flag and wrote a new national anthem. Sankara's first priorities after taking office were feeding, housing, and giving medical care to his people. In an attempt to eradicate polio, meningitis, and measles, he launched a mass vaccination program that was very successful. From 1983 to 1985, 2 million Burkinabés were vaccinated. Prior to Sankara's presidency, infant mortality in Burkina Faso was as high as about 20.8%, but this number would fall drastically to about 14.5% during his presidency. Sankara's administration was also the first African government to publicly recognize the HIV/AIDS epidemic as a major threat to Africa. He undertook large-scale housing and infrastructure projects as well. Brick factories were created in order to help in building houses as an effort to end urban slums. In an effort to fight deforestation, People's Harvest of Forest Nurseries was created to supply village nurseries as well as organizing the planting of millions of trees. Sankara also carried out a vast road and rail building project, and in a short while, all regions of the country were connected. Over 700 kilometers of rail was laid to facilitate manganese extraction in the Battle of the Rails without any foreign aid. These programs were an attempt to prove that African countries could be prosperous without foreign aid. Sankara also launched education programs to help in fighting the country's 90% illiteracy rate at the time. These programs were successful in the beginning, but shortly after the assassination of Thomas Sankara, wide-scale teacher strikes coupled with the new regime's unwillingness to negotiate led to the creation of revolutionary teachers. In an attempt to replace the nearly 2,500 teachers that were fired over a strike in 1996, anyone with a college degree was invited to teach through the Revolutionary Teachers Program. Volunteers merely received 10-day training course before beginning to teach. But under Sankara's presidency, the literacy rate went from 13% in 1983 to 73% in 1987. Shortly after taking power, Thomas Sankara established a system of courts known as the Popular Revolutionary Tribunals. The courts were originally created to try former government officials in such a manner that the average Burkinabe would participate or oversee the trial of the enemies of the revolution. Defendants were tried for corruption, tax evasion, or counter-revolutionary activities. Sentences for former government officials were light and often suspended. However, the tribunals were alleged to have been only a show trial, held very openly with oversight from the public. According to the U.S. State Department, the trial proceedings, including legal safeguard for the accused, did not meet international standards. Defendants were required to prove their innocence instead of the usual notion of innocent until proven guilty. They were also not permitted to hire legal representations. Originally, the people of Burkina Faso admired the courts, but the courts were alleged to have become corrupt and tyrannical as proceedings progressed. Some members of the government even built up their own tribunals to settle disputes and humiliate their enemies. Taking a lead from his mentor, Fidel Castro, Sankara established a mass-armed organization called the Committee for the Defense of the Revolution, CDRs. The organization served as a form of revolutionary vigilance and also as a counterweight to the power of the army, as well as to promote political and social revolution. A point of criticism regarding Sankara's rule was the way he handled the Mosi ethnic group. This ethnic group is the largest in Burkina Faso and adhered to strict hierarchical traditional social systems. At the top of the hierarchy is the Moho Naba, the king of the Mosi people. Sankara viewed this arrangement as an obstacle to national unity and proceeded to demote the Mosi elite. The Moho Naba was not allowed to hold court, and local village chiefs were stripped of their executive powers. The traditional powers of the Moho Naba were handed to the CDR. Sankara also fought tirelessly for women's rights and to improve women's social status in Burkina Faso. He was considered by many as a feminist. He declared in a speech, "There is no true social revolution without the liberation of women." His government banned female genital mutilation, forced marriages, and polygamy, while appointing women to high government positions. It has also been established that Sankara was the first African leader to appoint women to major cabinet positions and to recruit them actively in the military. As part of his foreign relations, Thomas Sankara defined his government programs as anti-imperialist. As a charismatic pan-Africanist, he was an outspoken opponent of foreign aid. His belief was that he who feeds you controls you. He spoke out against what he called neo-colonialist penetration of Africa through Western trade and finance in conferences such as the Organization of African Unity. He urged on African nations to get together to repudiate their foreign debt. In the late 1980s, when ecological awareness was still very low, Thomas Sankara was one of a few African leaders to consider environmental protection a priority. Over the space of 15 months, starting from October 1984, Sankara's government planted about 10 million trees in a campaign of reforestation. Sankara will explain, quote, "In Burkina, wood is our only source of energy. We have to constantly remind every individual of his duty to maintain and regenerate nature." Despite the great strides that were made, there was a growing dissent in the country, partly because of economic problems and opposition from traditional quarters to some of Sankara's more progressive social policies. His administration gradually lost popular support, and internal conflict within his government grew as well. Particularly, the summary trial and execution of 7 individuals associated with the previous government and accused of treason in 1984, and the dismissal of teachers as a result of strikes in the same year would tend to undermine his government's great strides. On October 15, 1987, Sankara was assassinated in a coup led by his compatriot Blaise Compaore and 2 others. Compaore went on to rule Burkina Faso for 27 years until a popular unrest led to his resignation in 2014. On October 15, 1987, Sankara and 12 other officials were assassinated by an armed gang in a coup staged by his compatriot Blaise Compaore. Compaore will explain that Sankara has damaged relations with former colonial powers France and neighboring Ivory Coast, and accused his erstwhile colleague of conspiring to murder opponents. After the coup and the death of Thomas Sankara, some CDR members loyal to Sankara mounted armed resistance for days before they were overwhelmed. According to Aluna Traore, the only survivor of the assassination, Sankara was shot as he stepped out of the door with his 2 hands raised. He was having a meeting with members of his cabinet at the council Dietente. After killing Sankara, 12 other members of his cabinet were also shot and killed by these assassins. Sankara and other dead bodies were hurriedly buried in unmarked graves. Decades later, after the fall of Blaise Compaore, 14 people were finally charged in connection with Sankara's murder, including Blaise Compaore in 2021. Compaore, who has been in exile in Côte d'Ivoire since 2014, along with former security chief Hyacinthe Kafando, will be tried in absentia. On October 11, 2021, the long-awaited trial began in Ouagadougou. When the verdict was announced on April 6, 2022, Compaore and 9 others were found guilty of having been complicit in Sankara's murder, while Hyacinthe Kafando was found guilty of the murder. Compaore, Kafando, and another defendant, General Gilbert Diendere, were sentenced to life in prison, while 8 other defendants received lesser sentences, while 3 of the defendants were acquitted. But what really happened on the day Sankara was assassinated? Go watch this video here next for a full account of his last day on earth and his last words. Remember to like this video and subscribe to Hispo Media if you have not done so already. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Peace.